The abuse of women in intimate relationships is a pervasive problem throughout the United States. Researchers have estimated that nearly 20% of women have been victims of domestic violence at some point in their lives, and more than 40% of these women sustained physical injuries from these assaults. According to Miller, approximately 19% of women in the United States were victims of physical abuse at the hands of their intimate partners. In addition to the prevalent nature, domestic violence victims risk high, rank high as an underreported crime. Many victims fail to report domestic violence incidents to law enforcement because of their perception that the police are unwilling or unable to act on their behalf. Victims also may fail to call the police because they are engaged in some type of criminal behavior or natural or mutual violence. Research by Filson and colleagues indicate that reporting based on analysis of the National Crime Victimization Survey involves a complex decision-making process where self-protection and seriousness override other factors that are commonly believed to inhibit inhibit victims from calling the police. It is important to examine officers' attitudes about domestic violence for several reasons. Researchers have noted that law enforcement officers view their work as being stressful and report frustration when responding to domestic violence calls. It is essential to understand how officers perceive their jobs and its difficulties, especially since frustration is associated with diminished health and poor morale. According to Johnson, research has not yet identified the primary sources of officers' frustration in terms of domestic violence. Society viewed domestic violence as a private matter, one that occurred behind closed doors. Similarly, police officers held negative attitudes and subscribed to myths regarding domestic violence and victims. Over time, however, changes in society's view towards domestic violence coincided with changes in the law enforcement response to domestic violence. Scholars have noted that there is a void in the literature in terms of studies that document law enforcement officers' perception of domestic violence. Additionally, police officers are faced with the responsibility of diffusing domestic violence situations by protecting the victim, keeping the peace, and enforcing the law. Consequently, their general attitudes and beliefs about domestic violence are likely to influence how they respond to these incidences. For this reason, the current research involves an exploratory examination of active duty officers' perceptions of domestic violence and their responses to this crime. This study also examines whether attitudes vary according to officers' characteristics.